Hey, what's going on, Dive Team? This is Mark with Jonesing the Scuba. And I always get a lot of questions when people find out that I worked on a cruise ship. So that's what we're going to talk about, my life as a dive instructor on a cruise ship. But before I get into that, you know what to do. Swim on down, kick that like button, subscribe to the page if you haven't done so already, and hit the bell notification for when I upload new content. And with that being said, let's dive on into it.
It's an infamous production.
Now, if you were wondering, I actually worked for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. Now, I did this for about 5 years on board, holding various positions from aquatic staff to dive instructor and loyalty ambassador. But mainly in this video, I'm just going to talk about what it was like being a dive instructor on board. And yes, I did live on the private islands in Labadee, Haiti, and the Coco Cay, Bahamas. So if you want me to go into more details on that in another video, just go ahead and leave me a comment down below, and I'll be more than happy to talk about what it was like living on a private island. Now, my experience was a little bit different than other dive instructors because I did learn how to get certified on a cruise ship, which is Liberty of the Seas. And then when I joined this ship, that's when I finished getting all my certifications from open water, advanced, rescue diver, dive master, and instructor. Well, the instructor I did on vacation, of course, during my IDC. But the rest of the courses were actually kind of fun because I learned different styles from different people. So I had people from Chile, Mexico, Brazil, Hungary, South Africa, Ireland, all in my training. So I got to pick up a lot of different pieces from them and their styles that I still incorporate today, which is actually kind of cool. So that's probably one of the biggest benefits that I took away, was learning from so many different people. Now, when I was on the ship, I was on board for a total of 5 years, part of it being a dive instructor. Now, when it comes to the teaching, you do teach, depending on how many instructors are on the ship, either every other week or every 2 weeks you're teaching. And again, it just depends on how big the ship was. So when I was on the smaller ships, there were 2 of us, and I would teach sometimes every week, or I would have a week off, a week. So it just depended on the ports of call. Like when I was on the Explorer of the Seas, there was 2 of us, but I would do 2 weeks on, a week off. From being the lead instructor, because on the Eastern Caribbean I was allowed to teach in St. Thomas, and then I would also do the Western Caribbean cruises too the next week, and that gave the other instructor time to do more of the internal stuff in the dive shop, to where I was just doing certs. So that was kind of cool. And then when I got on the bigger ships, there were actually 4 of us. So you would teach once every 4 weeks, or 3 weeks, depending on if one of the instructors was the dive manager on board. So the way it would work is the night before embarkation, we would print off the list of the students that were going to be joining us on the following cruise, print that list off, take it down to housekeeping, so housekeeping can have it in their rooms for when they boarded the ship. Now, once embarkation started, the very next day, we would be working in the dive shop probably around 2 o'clock, as soon as people were allowed to go to their rooms. Sometimes it was around noon. It just depended on the ship. So we'd go up to the dive shop and then boom, immediately start calling the guest to let them know, hey, this is Mark, I'm going to be your instructor, or whoever was teaching would leave that message like, hey, come up to the dive shop. We need you to fill out your student folders, go over your medical questionnaire real quickly as well. Now, while we were waiting for them to come up, we'd also be checking in people that didn't know you could actually purchase this online. They would just be walking by and be like, oh, hey, you guys teach people how to scuba dive? Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that they would be interested in. So we would sign them up. We'd have people coming up to get their tickets, to get signed off, to get them checked in. Now, when we would start checking them in, we would also make sure that they had the gear that was required, which was always a mask and snorkel. Now, if they didn't bring a mask and snorkel with them, we would actually sell them masks and snorkels. So we mostly sold Aqualung on board. That's who was the sponsor of Royal Caribbean, was Aqualung. So no Mars, no Ziegel, anything like that. So definitely get them their mask and snorkels. And then what we would do is we would get them fitted for their BCs and their wetsuits. So the BCs, we would come out of the dive shop. At that point, in my career, even now, I can look at you and tell you what size BCD you're going to be wearing. So we would come around, get them fitted, make sure everything fit properly, get them fitted for fins, and get them fitted for their wetsuits. And then after that, we would tell them, okay, we'll just come back up here around 6 o'clock. So we can go over our tank demonstration, and I can definitely show you how to set up your gear in another video as well. Again, leave me a comment down below and I'll be more than happy to do a video of me setting up my gear and explaining how we do it and the way we do it and why. So we would get them set up. We would show them how to set up their tanks to their BCs, and then we would have them do it as well. And then we would just tell them, okay, have a good night. We will see you, which mostly what the next day was the C day. And we did it a little bit different. We would do the pool sessions and then the knowledge reviews and then the dive. So normally you would do knowledge reviews, dives, or knowledge reviews, pool, then dive. So the next day would be a C day. And remember, working on a cruise ship, you do work long hours. You can. And you don't go to bed till later in the evening. It just depends on you as a person. So after the dive shop, we would go down. Normally, as the dive instructor, you would finish around 7 o'clock. Now, if you were scheduled at the shore excursion desk, you would have to go down to the shore excursion desk till about 9 o'clock. When you got off, you would just go down to the office, make sure there was nothing else to do for the day, no printing off tickets, delivering them to housekeeping, because there's normally a person dedicated to do that, normally about 5 or 6 o'clock. So you would finish. Normally I would go to the back deck, which was the crew area, and I would just hang out, have a beer, talk, see friends from other departments. Me and my wife would go back there, have a few beers, go to bed. We try to get to bed around midnight. Now the next day was a C day. You would get up about 7 a.m., 6:45, just depends. Run up to the dive shop, grab all your BCDs, so you would pack them in their bags, and then take them down to the pool or take them over to the pool. Just depended on what ship I was on. So on the smaller ships, we would use the pool right next to the dive shop, which was the solarium pool, and I would teach in there. When I was on the Oasis class, which was the bigger ships, really cool experience because we got to dive in the aqua theater. Why was that a cool experience? It's because a lot of people don't get to dive in that, except for the crew that are in the aqua theater show. So as a guest, if it were me wanting to get certified, I would definitely do it on the bigger ship, because you're getting to dive in a pool that nobody else gets to use except for the crew that are in that show. So we would start about 7 a.m. And we'd start doing their pool session, and then finish around 10 a.m. And then what I would do at that point, once I finished their pool session, I would run the dive gear back up to the dive shop. Now, if I was working with a really cool instructor, they would wash all my gear for me. If not, I would just drop it off, run downstairs, have a quick shower, grab a bite to eat, and then my shift for the dive shop didn't start for about 2 hours, so I would definitely take a nap, get some rest, because I had a long night the night before and a really early morning. So I would go down, take a nap, wake up, get changed, run back up to the dive shop, and then start my normal day around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then finish the dive shop around 7. And then of course, what would I do? Me and my wife, she would finish work about 9. We'd go have dinner, and then right to the back deck to go have drinks with some friends. Not all the time, but most times we would, just to go to the back deck. Now, when I'm talking about having a drink, I'm not always talking about alcohol. We would sit there and have a Diet Coke or have a Sprite. It just depended on how the cruise was going and our mood that day. But most of the time, it was like having a Diet Coke or a Sprite or beer, rum and Coke, whatever. But we would just go back, have a drink, and meet up with some friends and just talk. And mostly we would just talk about what was going on that day, life in general, and that was most of the conversations. So go to bed, get up the next day, which was mostly, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was Jamaica. So we would have a later arrival, and then we would leave around 4 or 5. If I'm remembering this correctly. Now, I am a little bit older, so I may tend to forget times. But back on board, and then get my classroom ready for the students' knowledge reviews, because the very next day was Cozumel, where we would be doing the dive. So get back on board, get my classroom set up. Now, we would normally have a dedicated room, conference room on the ship, and if we couldn't get in there, just depending on how many groups we're cruising that had the conference rooms booked, we would also teach in the disco, which was actually kind of fun too, being in the disco on the TVs, having the video playing. So I personally like teaching in the disco than the conference room, because it wasn't as stuffy. Now, we would finish that. I wouldn't go to the dive shop that day, because it was normally formal night was on the second day, sorry. So I would normally go up to the shore excursion desk and help those guys out. So I would, finish that class, go to my room, change into my evening outfit, and then go up to the shore excursion desk and help those guys out to, finish closing that desk a lot faster than they normally would. Again, finish 9 o'clock, go have dinner with the wife, and probably go to the back deck again to have a drink and catch up with friends. Now, the next day would be the dive. So it was either Grand Cayman, Cozumel, St. Thomas, it just depended on the route and the port that we were going to. So I'm going to use Cozumel for an example. So we would get there about 9 o'clock in the morning. I would meet my students at the dive shop 15 minutes before we pulled into the dock. And I would meet up with them. We'd get all of our gear, make sure, and I would make them check too, to make sure they had their BCD, their regs, fins, make sure everything was in there. Even though I did pack it and I knew it was in there, it's always good, because if you're not packing your own gear, you want to make sure that somebody didn't leave something out of your bag. So I would pack up everybody's stuff and make them check that they had everything. We'd get our bags and boop, walk right down the pier. Now, the cool thing about Cozumel was the dive spot was right off the pier. So we'd walk to the end of the pier, and right to the left was Sand Dollar, where we would do our shore dive. And if you haven't seen that video, it is Student Dive Cozumel that I have uploaded, and that's where we would do our dive in Cozumel. So really cool. There was a plane wreck and an anchor down there, and I think maybe a ship. I don't really remember correctly. So that's where we would do the dive. Now, it was about 4 hours out of the day, so people wouldn't really miss the full port, because we wouldn't leave Cozumel till later in the afternoon. So students still had time to go explore, go get something to go have something to eat, go to, if they wanted to, Senior Frogs or Carlos and Charlie's. Totally up to them what they wanted to do. Now, for me, what I would do is I would tell everybody, hey, let's go up to the dive shop. If you want, you can leave me some of your gear. And I wouldn't take very much, just because I am one person and those bags are heavy. So I would help 2-3 students. Now, if the students were coming back to the ship, the other students would ask them, hey, can you take my gear with you? Things like that. But I would let them know, if you take your gear with you into port, you are responsible for that gear. If you lose it, we will charge you for it. So this is your responsibility if you are taking it with you. If you don't want to, ask another student if they will take it for you. I already have too much on me. I can't take any more. So anybody that was coming back to the ship, I would ask them, hey, do you guys want to go have lunch at the Windjammer or somewhere? And we would go sit down and we would have lunch at the Windjammer, which is the main buffet on board for guests. And we would just sit there and talk. Now, I did forget to mention too, after the dives, I would tell everybody, hey, the last sea day, I need you to come up to the dive shop so I can go ahead and get you finished, signed off, give you your logbook, take your picture, and then get you your temporary cert. Now, once we would do that, I would explain to them, okay, on that very last sea day, here's your logbook. I would fill it out for them with the dives, and I would explain, okay, this is what this is. These are everything that you finished. This is still what you need to finish for your open water. This is what you need to do still. And they would say, okay, have them sign their book, take their picture right then and there. And then, when they would leave later in the afternoon, or, if they came in spurts, I would actually upload all the information on Patty's website, and then I would also email them their certification cards. Now, the cool part was too, I actually met a lot of really cool guests on board that, tipping wasn't everything, but I did receive some pretty good tips. But a lot of the students would ask me, hey, let's go have a drink afterwards. We really appreciate your service. So that last sea day at night, typically I would go down to the guest areas and have a glass of wine, or whatever they were having. I would not really match it, but if they were having beer, I'd have beer. If they were having wine, I'd have wine. If they were having hard liquor, I'd probably still stick with a beer or two, just because when you do work on board, there is a alcohol tolerance that you're not allowed to go over. So it's 0.08 off duty, which isn't much. So you can get fired if you are over that amount, and you do get stopped to be breathalyzed. So that's normally how my 7-day cruise would go. Now, in between there, I would be working at a shore excursion desk, working on the tours, sending tours out. It really all just depended on the run that we were doing. But I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you want me to go into more details about anything else that I did on the ships, again, leave me a comment in the link below. And as I always say at the end of my videos, stay safe and happy diving. Hey, Tom Brady. Hey, Rob Gronkowski. Don't think you got off so easy. Congratulations winning the Super Bowl. But it's over. You're in the off season. Hit me up. Don't be afraid. I'm still waiting for that contact. So hit me up. Let's go.